4 seconds. And not, and
I love that. That's my favorite answer I think I've heard yet.
You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
J.T. Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey, Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Long,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is
Scott Moon, and Craig Martelle.
I would really like to thank each of you for tuning in all the time. Those of you that have subscribed over at hankgarner.com, thank you. I appreciate that. It helps other people find the show when you subscribe. There's handy links over the right-hand sidebar at hankgarner.com. I'd like to thank some sponsors today for making all of these shows possible. A huge amount of time, effort, and expense go into producing the show, and it's our faithful sponsors who make all this possible and allow us to bring you 5 shows a week. I don't know many other podcasts that bring you 5 episodes a week, but we're happy to do it, and thank you to our sponsors who allow us to do that. If you would like to sponsor the show, go to hankgarner.com, and there's a handy link up in the menu bar there. Nick Breaker's book Essence, Book 1 Septima, is available now. This is a really unique book that Nick has written. It's kind of the best of science fiction and urban fantasy, mixed with a little bit of romance. It's a really cool mashup of genres that Nick has come up with. I love this book. I think you will too. Book 1 is out now of the Essence series. It's called Septima. And Nick said just the other day that book 2 and 3 are coming very quickly. This is some really, really innovative writing. I think you're going to love it. Go ahead and grab book 1, Septima, now, and be ready for books 2 and 3, which are coming out in rapid succession in 2018. Nick Breaker, Essence, book 1, Septima. Go pick it up. We're going to hear from some more sponsors later on in the show. And as always, don't forget to stay tuned at the end of the show for a special audiobook clip from Richard Gleaves, the Jason Crane series. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to have Scott Moon and Craig Martelle on the show. They are doing some really cool stuff together in a collaborative nature, and I reached out to Scott to ask him if he would like to come on and talk about this. Authors working together and collaborating absolutely fascinates me. And we want to kind of dig into their process a little bit. Scott is no stranger to the show. Scott's been on a couple of times, and I've done some time over at Keystroke Medium as well. So I think the audience already knows Scott, but I've not had the pleasure of having Craig on the show before. So welcome, Scott, and welcome, Craig.
Hey, good to be here, Hank. Thanks for inviting me.
Good to see you again.
Absolutely. Craig, since we have not chatted before, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or a storyteller?
Oh, goodness. An awful long time ago, probably a 10, 11, 12. My brother is 7 years older than me, so as I was growing up, I didn't play with him a lot. I mean, he went to go play baseball, so I had little to do. And he had a great science fiction collection, so I started reading probably when I was 8, 9, or 10, but reading science fiction like Robert E. Howard, the Conan series, and stuff like that. So I started reading, and I just loved the stories, and I thought, hey, I can tell stories too, because some of the books weren't that good. I'm like, I can tell a story as good as this or better than this. Arrogance of youth. So during the summers, I'd read. During Christmas and the Christmas winter break, I'd read, and I became a voracious reader. And then my sister, who is 3 years older than me, who we have very little in common, she got an assignment to write a story, any story. And she's like, I can't do this for high school. It was her senior year. I was a freshman. And I'm like, I can do that. So I wrote her, it was like 20 pages typed, a short story of a dungeon campaign. And she turned it in. She turned in my work as hers. And I got a B+, which I was pretty pissed about. But that's because the teacher wasn't a gamer. She wasn't a D&D-er. And keep in mind, what a wench. So the 1970s, So I thought everybody would have heard of D&D by then, but she hadn't. It was a cool dungeon adventure, and that was the first thing I ever wrote. So I actually probably wrote it when I was in 8th grade, and she was a junior, because I turned in that very same story. Freshman year for my freshman English comp class, and there I got an A. So wiser
heads prevailed at that point.
Well, that's right. I think
a little more cultured audience.
It's all about the presentation. Here you can see that I'm a gamer. Here's a game story, as opposed to here's a young woman and she's writing a D&D story. What the hell is this? In the 70s, it wasn't cool to be a female role gamer, so they never admitted that. But I find out now that there was a huge population of gamers. It's good to see now. I just wish it would have been that way back then, because who wouldn't like a game with women? I mean, see a bunch of stinky guys eating Frito.
Especially when you're in 8th grade, you're probably hoping you could get some,
That's right. Where else are you going to meet girls? D&D game? Oh my God.
That'd be perfect.
It's so weird looking back now. The way gaming and kind of geeky stuff has become mainstream, and like nerd culture is now pop culture, and I say nerd culture with all the love and respect it deserves. But yeah, I mean, there was a time where that was just not the fact, and it's so bizarre. When I'm talking to my kids and stuff, and they just can't believe that it hasn't always been this way.
Yeah, it was a stigma. When I was a freshman or a sophomore, the local paper did a full-page, full-color spread on my D&D campaign, because I had miniatures that I had painted. I didn't live very far from Lake Geneva, so I grew up within the physical boundary of D&D, of TSR. So I
in the Shadow Gen Con and all of that.
Oh my God, Jim Ward and Gary Gydax and Ernie and the crowd. I mean, it was way cool. So I had a full gaming. I had taken our pool table and set it up with a dungeon using boards instead of look-alike castle walls and stuff like that. And they sent a photographer, and he did a great job photographing the miniatures and 4 of us playing. And it was really cool, except it was also a guarantee never to get laid, because as a boy, you don't want to be on the front page of the paper being a geek. Not in those days. If you did that now, you'd be like the school hero. And I'm glad that has changed, because let people embrace their hobbies, whatever they may be, and be recognized for that, and just appreciate that, hey, somebody cares enough to do something to the nth degree.
Right. Exactly. So you had this geek cred, and you love to write. So naturally you joined the military, didn't you?
So of course, I went in the Marine Corps, because that's where if you want to be a knight in shining armor, that's the place to be. You just have a lot more firepower.
Right.
So I carried stuff around with me, and one of my stories is Metamorphosis Alpha, which is a books that I publish now in conjunction with James Ward, the game's original creator. But I bought that book myself with my own money for $5 out of the back of D&D. They had the ad, so I mail ordered from Lake Geneva, and I carried that with me through my whole career. That game rules, that set of game rules, has been in probably 20 different countries around the world. As I deployed, I took it with me just to read. I never played, and then I retired from the Marine Corps. What do I want to do when I grow up? So, of course, I went to law school. I got my law degree, and then I became a business consultant, because having JD behind your name gets you into the corner office. So worked successfully as a business consultant, and finally I realized, hey, I'm making great money, but I'm away from home half of my life. I didn't want to do that anymore. So at 52 years old, finally, I hung up my spurs, sat down at the computer, and said, I am going to write a book. I always wanted to write a book. I'm going to. 61 days later, I had my first book, a 100,000-word tome, and then I messed around with editing it and stuff like that. And over the last 2 years, I learned how to streamline that process, write better characters, write better plots, and publish professional books in a way that the readers like. I have a great fan base. They are so supportive. I have probably the best beta readers on the planet, I say, because they'll give me honest feedback in a way that, hey, this part of the story doesn't work, this part does. And usually it's not anything too critical that doesn't take long to rewrite. Although one book, Nomad 7, they came back and said, I hate it. This doesn't work at all. I used a different style. I used a flashback style to tell the story. So I took 22 hours and I rewrote the whole damn book because I never miss deadlines. That's my whole claim to fame, is I'm not going to miss this deadline. So I fixed that up front now, and now I get feedback a little quicker if I'm going to try something different.
Yeah.
Wow. So your first 100K plus book in 61 days. What genre were you writing in, and what was the catalyst for where the story came from?
I live 150 miles from the Arctic Circle in the middle of Alaska. I live there's a place called North Pole, Alaska. Well, I don't live there. I live 20 miles north of there. And so I was looking at it. Winter was coming on. I'm like, hey, I think I'm a prepper. I think I would do okay if the world ended. So I wrote that storyline on that premise. And so I researched what would I do, because I was going to do that anyway. Oh, okay. Hey, what kind of axe should I buy to have in my go bag? What's my 3-day go bag look like? What's my 1-week go bag? That kind of thing. And so I wrote the book on that premise, like, here, you just lost everything. What do you have? And I realized that I really suck as a prepper, and I had a lot of work to do. So that whole book, it was one book. It wasn't edited well because I couldn't find an editor, because I didn't know where to look. There was no 20 books to 50K yet. So I published it, and then a publisher actually saw it and said, hey, we're a small publisher, but we'd like to publish this. We need a new cover. We need a new title, and it needs to be edited, but the story is sound. I think the hardest thing that authors have is, are you able to tell a good story? And it turned out that I was okay, and I think that I chalked that up to being a voracious reader. If you don't read, I don't understand how you could tell a story. But then again, storytellers, people have been telling stories way before they could write. So storytelling, I think, is natural for us, but doing it well, that was a challenge. But I found out, hey, I was okay. And yeah, there was a lot left to learn, but the story itself was okay. I got great editing. I got great advice. I got a new title that actually sold. And then that one book cut into 2 became a 4-book series that we then, that has been a bestseller. So it worked out very, very well. And that's advice I would give new people. You don't know until you publish it. And even though that book sold a total of like 56 copies, it got me in the door. It got me the feedback and the input I needed in order to become a better writer and become a professional. So get it out there. Take your lumps. This book sucks. Okay, yeah, I got some of those too. I actually got a review on that book like 2 days ago that says the author is the laughing stock of all Alaska. So it was a one-star.
Awesome review.
I should turn it into an ad. Laughing stock of all.
Yeah, put that on your credits in your resume.
A Dragon Con nominee and laughing stock.
Stands as a pillar of things not to do in Alaska. It's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, so much that you said there, I completely agree with, Craig. I'm sitting here shaking my head. Like, I believe, and I have this pet theory, and I know people are sick of listening to me talk about it, but I really believe that storytellers are born and writers are made. I think there's a gene or something that just some people have the ability to just weave a story and to tell a yarn, and then if you want to be a writer, then you take that storytelling, ability, and you work on it, and you work on your craft, and you get better and better and better. And there's only 2 ways to be a better writer, and that's to read a lot and to write a lot. And I completely agree with you. And when you know that you have it, you sit down at the keyboard and it just comes out.
I played golf. I played golf down to the scratch level. And the only way I got there was I was out there swinging the club out and writes a book, and all of a sudden it's a great book. Even though I was a voracious reader, it's a different skill set. You know what you like. So when you go back through, it's like, okay, this isn't what I expected. I wrote it thinking I was saying this, but I wasn't. And that's why my beta readers are so great because they'll come back and say, I don't understand this. And I'll go back and look at it and say, that's right. That's not what I meant to say. But storytelling is not, it's natural, but writing a novel is not. So
Yes. And there are skills and certain tools that you have to learn how to use, and the novel is a medium all of its own, and there are certain things that you can and can't do, and things that work well, and certain things that don't, and the only way you know that is to do it and to get feedback from other people that know how to do it well, and to grow your craft.
And this is where I want to bring Scott in, because this is when Scott and I first met at the Smarter Artist Summit, and this is why you go to conferences. You meet people, you talk to people, and I met Scott, and I naturally liked him. I thought he was in the Marine Corps. He wasn't, which I'm sorry. He
I was
took
a wannabe.
different path in life. But but he struck me as a Marine, and that is a persona, not necessarily the fact that you went to boot camp and got and wear the bird ball and hook. So I started looking at some of Scott's stuff, and I thought, hey, this is okay. I like the way he tells a story. I like the way he shapes the character. So then I talked to him about, hey, I have this idea. I'll write the first book, and you take a look and see if you can you can follow on with this kind of feeling of Firefly meets. I said Firefly meets Bonanza, and Scott said, how about Firefly meets Tombstone? I'm like, oh, that's awesome. It's so much better. Because it's completely different audiences, and it was one we were looking for. Firefly meets Tombstone is the audience that we really wanted to zoom in on. So one thing I liked, and I brought that Dark Landing 1 to Scott. He took it. He wrote Dark Landing 2, and I'm like, this is a good story. This is what we're looking for. And the collaboration, even though we were already knee deep in it, was not just born but excelling in a way that I love reading the stories. And if we love reading the stories, then I have high hopes that the readers will love reading the stories. And actually, I booked ads. We've got it set up starting the 18th, Dark Landing. What do you think, Scott?
I think it's awesome. I mean, when I read your first story, and I immediately grasped onto our initial conversations, and it just felt really natural. I mean, and I read back those stories about it is you talked earlier about all your beta readers, and it was neat. I've had beta readers before, but I remember I sent you my first contribution to the series, and like 4 hours later, you're like, yeah, my first 3 beta readers, they like this, and this, and they don't like this. And it's like, man, that's a really fast turnaround. So very impressive. I mean, it blew me away. I couldn't hardly believe it.
Speaking of that, Craig, how did you go about finding these beta readers and finding the audience that you are able to call on and to depend on their input so quickly and so intensely?
It's the group that Michael Anderle cultivated, the just-in-time readers, because his readership he built out of his target audience was whale readers, people who read like a book a day. And to get that, he needed to produce at a certain velocity, a book a month, or even 1 to 1.5 books a month. In order to do that, he had to compress the processes. So his editor was working on like the first half of the book while he was writing the second half. Now, I have started to do that a bit, although I like handing my editor the full package. However, I actually have her on salary, so I will get the book back within a week and then turn it over to the beta readers. And the beta readers have a very quick turnaround, and these people were discovered because they were fans. And I started collaborating with Michael, and they became my fans too. They've read all my stuff. They like my stuff. They like the style. They like the interaction that we have in regards to stories. They've given me story ideas. And Dark Landing was actually a couple I call them my developmental editors, Doreen and Diane, and I'm sure a lot of people on your show will know who they are. The double D's, they call themselves. They have read all my stuff. They've provided great feedback. They've helped me with direction, but Dark Landing was their idea, kind of an Alaska during the Gold Rush era. But we didn't want to put it here because of the challenges in writing fiction, where we wouldn't offend any groups of people or take something that wasn't as make it not as serious as it was. So we put it out in space and made it safe to talk about the original Star Trek, the original series approach to dealing with race issues and any other issues. We just want to tell a story and show an overall society that we would like to see. And how do we go against people who don't believe in what we believe in regards to freedoms and liberties and things like that. So Dark Landing came about. We made the evil company, the Conglom, as the
Sagittarian conglomerate, SAGCON.
SAGCON, the unseen evil entity. So we made that, and we approached it. But the Double Ds were the ones that came up with that idea. So when I send out, we have Dark Landing 4. I'm going to give it a read, and then we're going to shoot it out to the beta readers. And since it's about 30,000 words, I guarantee we'll get it back within one day. All 5 readers will read it and send in, hey, here, I found a typo here. How about this? I've got a question on this. And we'll get that feedback within one day because they like the series so much.
That is seriously intense.
It's just amazing. I mean, and the thing is every one of their comments that Craig passed on to me made the story better. It's like, well, yeah, of course. Oh God, I can't believe I missed that. And just so fast and detailed, because my experience with the beta readers is, I love them to death, but sometimes it might take 6 months to get a book back to me. And it's hard to keep up when you got to wait that long for feedback.
Right. And until you find the right beta readers, if you're just kind of throwing it out there and just asking for kind of broad opinions from a wide variety of people, you're liable to get back all kinds of comments, and most of them may not be helpful for what you are trying to do. So finding the proper people is essential.
And this group have read, 25, 28 of my books. So they understand my style. They understand what I'm going for. And now Scott has been pulled into that, and they're loving the Dark Landing that Scott's writing. It helps immensely. And also, these are folks who, they're whale readers. They appreciate the volume. They appreciate the velocity. So giving them a book a month, and now it's multiple books with because I have a couple other collaborations going on as well, and they absorb it because they know it's a comfort food in that they know they're going to get something that's not too dark. It's going to have some humor. It's going to have a happy ending in a certain way. It's going to have characters that have flaws that are just trying to do better. And that's just, I guess that's my footprint that I leave on all the books I'm associated with.
What genre is this? I know we said it's Firefly meets Tombstone, but when you're having to put this in Amazon buckets, what do you call it?
Oh, geez, I actually just uploaded it today to get it on there. This isn't going to run before the 18th, is it? Or is this live? Are we live right now?
No, we're not live right now. This is this goes out the week before Christmas. And I'll edit this out.
No, this will be live.
Okay, yeah,
by then. So
yes.
Yeah, the 18th.
We went with science fiction. We went with space adventure and space opera. I didn't go with action adventure because it's not that much action. It's more cerebral. It's more character driven. There is action, of course, but I went with those categories because of the audience. Some of the keywords I used were space western frontier colonization. That was one of the keyword stacks that I used in this book.
We've seen several folks here lately that have just found enormous success with finding their audience, making sure they're writing to the right genre, finding an underserved population right to them. I think kind of the poster children right now are Nick Cole and Jason Onspach with their Galaxy's Edge series. I mean, they're just knocking them out of the park, and they've kind of fine-tuned it to make sure they're getting directly to the readers that want these, publishing quickly, getting them out there, and making great books. When you're dealing with a mashup like this, what are some of the things that you are conscious of ahead of time to make sure that you're finding the audience that is going to be able to find these and scoop them up as quickly as you can publish them and all of that?
The benefit for us is I already have an established readership. I sell between 5,000 and 10,000 books a month. So I have an established readership. This style is similar, just a little bit different. The genre is space, but it's characters. All of my books are in different genres, from post-apocalyptic to alien contact to space opera. And I say this falls in the space opera. It's got a little bit of a Western flavor because we have a sheriff, but the it's really about the characters and the flow. So I am going to have a base readership of, I hope, 2,000 or 3,000 will pick it up, and they'll help sell it just through reviews and hitting ads. I actually booked an ad this morning, and it will continue to book more ads for next week. I've got a bunch of newsletter swaps, and the most important thing is the genre aligned in with people who do space opera. If somebody is specifically mill sci-fi, then this might not relate. It's so important because I see a lot of requests for newsletter swaps that are sci-fi or fantasy. Those are two distinct readerships. You may get some crossover, but please don't send my mill sci-fi to a fantasy audience. They will hate me. I would much prefer to get somebody to swap with somebody who's 500 people on their list, but it's space opera. That means people are used to reading about characters, a little bit of action, but it's the character driven and an overall plot. So that's what, even though these are shorter stories, they have a plot that starts at the beginning and ends like a TV episode that doesn't leave a cliffhanger. Each one, it leaves an overall, hey, here's something else to think about, a tangent, but the main story arc is starts and ends with each episode. So that's how we're putting this out. Episodic serials, which a lot of people say, oh, that doesn't work. Well, we're going to make it work because this is a good damn story. We've got a good loyal readership, and we're doing our best to get it out there to let other people see that, hey, this is fun. And we're publishing every 18 days because we're beating Amazon's algorithm, which the 30-day cliff, actually, if you look closely, it's 18 days. So every 18 days, I'll get an episode for at least the first 5, maybe 6 episodes, and we'll reevaluate where we are at that point.
Thanks to our good friend Daniel Arthur Smith and Tales from the Canyons of the Damned. Episode 20 is out now. I have a feeling there's going to be a new episode out any day now. You're going to love this series if you like the old pulp magazines. Tales from the Canyons of the Damned expertly grabs that old feeling that you used to get from reading pulp and comic magazines. Go pick it up today, Tales from the Canyons of the Damned. It's my favorite monthly publication. Also, I'd like to thank the Future Chronicles. These are the very cutting-edge collections of science fiction and fantasy. If you want to know where the writers of tomorrow are coming from, they're coming from the Future Chronicles. There's a link over in the right-hand sidebar where you can go collect these amazing collections of stories of the very best speculative fiction, science fiction, and fantasy. Thank you to the Future Chronicles. Our friend Terry R. Hill has 2 amazing brand new books out, 2 Months with Harvey and Joseph of Bethlehem. As Terry was finishing the book Joseph of Bethlehem, which is an amazing book all about the forgotten hero of the Christmas story, and that's Joseph. This is full of great historical research and also a story that will grab you by the heart. Joseph of Bethlehem is the perfect book for this time of year. But when Terry was finishing that book, he and his family were hit by Hurricane Harvey. And for the next 2 months, his community dealt with the fallout and aftermath of this massive storm. And sadly, there are a lot of people in the Houston area where Terry lives that are still dealing with the fallout of Hurricane Harvey. This amazing book is his on-the-ground reporting of what happened during and after Hurricane Harvey. Some amazing pictures told through the lens of social media as the event was unfolding. And the proceeds of this book are going to folks still dealing with Hurricane Harvey. 2 Months with Harvey and Joseph of Bethlehem. Go pick them up both from Terry R. Hill, and you can get a signed copy of each of those at terryrhill.net. Now back to the show. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Scott, what was your reaction when Craig brought this to you and proposed that you guys collaborate on this?
Oh, I didn't hesitate for a second. I'm kind of a leap before you look kind of guy when it comes to projects and stuff. But I had submitted a couple of short stories also to some of his anthologies, to the Metamorphosis anthology, Expanding Universe and whatnot. And when we got serious about this, I was like, the minute he suggested, I'm like, yep, I'm totally down with that. Let's do that. And we talked about it, kicked it around some more, and it started out really as Firefly, and that's the tone when you're talking about the genre. I explain it to people in the real world here. I always say it's space opera Western, which I don't think is a genre that exists in Amazon, but that's the feel I'm always writing for, is for Firefly type stuff. But the Tombstone influences creep in because I can't help it, and it's turned out to be a pretty good mix. It's kind of flowed. Some of those characters literally just walked themselves on scene and did their thing. So I'm extremely excited to be writing, and it's so much fun. Normally the thought of an 18-day deadline for a 30,000 word manuscript on top of my other obligations would be pretty scary, but I'm not that worried about it. I'm already well into episode 5, and it's going well. I'm really liking it, and I like it that the beta readers like it. So exciting stuff.
I love that you're a jump first, kind of person. Because one thing I learned a long time ago is if you're going to do anything in life, you need to learn how to say yes. Because opportunities come, and if you sit and worry about things too much, you'll never do anything.
Nobody's going to come and get you. You got to go out there and put yourself out there.
That's right. So let's talk a little bit about how this actually works. Like, what is your collaborative process? And I know, Craig, you kind of spitballed it originally and wrote the first part of it, but how do you guys pass it back and forth, and who does what in the collaboration?
This is it's as far as writing the stories, it's easier than a collaboration. I wrote the first book. Scott wrote the second book and has written every book since. I'm going to write, I believe, the 6th book as an offshoot. But Scott floats the idea, and I'm like, hey, that sounds great. And that's it. And then Scott goes, writes the story. He makes it so easy. And I take on the responsibility of making sure we get the covers and the marketing. So it's almost like a publisher-author kind of relationship. But also one thing that I did, we have a contract, of course, and one thing I wanted to do for Scott, because I know he's got a day job and he has other stuff, was to remove that financial risk. So Scott is going to get paid in a certain way. So he hasn't invested his time for possibly no gain. Like if I bailed out and gooned up the marketing and this book doesn't sell, Scott is still compensated in a way that it hasn't been bad. That's not going to be the case. We're going to kill it, and he's going to make lots of money. I'm going to make lots of money. Everybody makes lots of money, and the readers are happy, which is most important. The first book is coming out at 99 cents. It's only 35 cents royalty for us. But still, it's to get people in the door. We'll call it a loss leader. So the collaboration process is we float the idea and we stay out of each other's way, and then we bring it together and we'll read it. Scott read mine. When I get book 6 done, I'll shoot it to Scott for his input to make sure that it gels and that it flows, because it's nice to get a second party. I've known collaborations where people try to write together, put it in Google Docs, and they're trying to that's a lot of friction. Even if you're having fun, it's still time consuming to wait on the other person and you do nothing, or you write something and then you try to make a mix. No. And this is the same way with the collaboration with Michael Anderle in the books. And I am on the other screen. I have 50,000 words done on My Bad Company 2 with a second book. And I'll just tell Michael, hey, here's what's going on. Here's a piece of technology. Does this work in your universe? And he'll say yay or nay, and then we write the book and go forth and conquer. The beta readers are the ones that keep us honest, because they've read all the books, and so they help with that. I mean, not just help; they make sure that works for all the rest of the readers out there. So that's what we do for each other. I'll read Scott's, he'll read mine. We'll make sure it jives, and we'll hit publish and move on. But every 18 days, you're going to see this serial, and I think that's going to set the standard. And you'll see the readership build, because managing reader expectations is part of the key to an author's success, especially in indie. And first-time authors, you publish one book, and you wonder, hey, I'm not getting readers. Well, that's because they wonder if you're just going to publish one and be gone. And that's why most people tell them, hey, your third book, then people will start taking you seriously, and there you are. The third book in a series, so you can build that readership incrementally. So what we'll see is people already know me and know that I publish with great frequency, so they should expect these. And especially we have 4 done and 5 underway. We'll be publishing these for, well, we expect to do all 12 exactly 18 days apart for the whole series.
Yep, I think it's totally doable. It's an extremely liberating process. It's one of I've done all different levels of collaboration, as far as like Craig and I are doing, where we come up with the idea, one of us writes it, kicks it to the other person, and like when I send something, I know that he's going to pump the brakes if I go way off track, help keep me, on the path. And then his beta readers will give their feedback and make sure I haven't made any huge mistakes and things like that. So it's easy to be creative, because you don't feel like, well, you're not going line by line. Well, what if they don't like this? What if my collaborator doesn't like this? Did we talk about this yesterday? And I've had a couple of other good ones. Josh Hayes and I wrote 2 stories for the Chris Kennedy, Mark Wandre book for a few credits more, and those stories are really tightly interlinked, but they're completely separate stories. And that was, we each wrote a 12,000 word story for that book, and it was exhausting. It was harder than writing a novel, but it was great, but a totally different experience than how we're doing this. So it's really good to get it out there, and it comes right back. And every now and then I'll throw some ideas to Craig and get his feedback, and so far it's been good, especially characters. It's usually a character idea. Like I said, I think I just created a Haas Cartwright type of character, and he's going to go in here as this, and he's like, oh yeah, that's going to work. So
yep. And the dog, created an alien dog that is loyal. It reminds me of John Carter of Mars. So a great addition to the thing, because of course I love dogs, and all readers should love dogs.
Yeah, I'm a dog person for sure. Maximus is the dog in this, or the dog pig thing, or whatever I call him in there. Yeah. He's got some characters, because you want to give him that personality, but I wanted to go a little bit different than just what you would see like a normal terrestrial dog. So this one's got some interesting characteristics that I hope people like, or at least amused by.
I love it. There's going to be 12 episodes if you want to. You guys said, did you plan that out ahead of time, and did you make a story Bible that you could go you could each reference as it goes along to make sure you're on track, or what was the pre-planning of this like?
Craig initially sent me, after we talked about it, he sent me kind of the starter kit, as you were, as a spreadsheet with a bunch of different characters. There are short backstories, some stuff about the basic geopolitical environment and tech levels. And then one of the most useful things is he gave me a list of Ungwillock names, which is the planet that are available for use. One of the things that kills my writing momentum is I'll be cruising along and I'll need a new character and I don't know their name, and that'll just shut down. So I go back and take one off the list and cross it out. But yeah, that's how we got started. Now, I haven't really updated it.
Now we're on autopilot now, so
yeah, it's just all self-contained.
So did we plan out all 12? We planned out the first 3, and we started writing, and that was good enough. We'll figure it out as we go. We have enough ideas for 12 episodes, I have no doubt. So no, it wasn't as well planned as we want people to believe after they read the stories. So that's the I'm a very organic writer, and I've finally come to the realization that I kind of plan as I write. I'll do a little bit of an outline, but
most of that outline has to be updated as I go. So a lot of times I'm drafting the first draft as I build the outline as well.
Scott, I think a lot of people are that way. I've talked to a lot of writers, and a few of them are really intense outliners. And a few of them are just completely fly by the seat of their pants. But I think the great majority of people kind of plan as they go, or have an idea of the overarching plan, at least know where they're going, and it kind of fills in as they go. I think that's a pretty common experience.
Yeah, I firmly believe that you have a new idea carries with it kind of an innate energy. And it only lasts so long. And so the bigger chunk of that project you can get done early, whether that's a detailed outline or a first draft or whatever. I think that moving quickly is going to give you the most entertaining story, the most true story, because you're not going to overthink it. You just got to go with your muse.
Craig, earlier you talked about that you guys are publishing serially, and that, some people worry that serials don't do well. I actually disagree with you. I think some serials are hugely popular, but it all depends on the intention behind it. I think where a lot of people fail is they write a novel and say, I'm just going to split this up into 5 pieces and serialize it and try to gain some momentum by doing that. And it was never intended to be a serial. It's a novel that they just split up, and that becomes a very different thing. It's got a whole different feel, and the breaks are not the same, and each of the pieces are not kind of self-contained. But what was your thoughts on how to maintain the serial nature and the episodic nature of it? And I guess kind of
TV episodes.
That's exactly what I was about to say. Were you thinking like TV episodes where everything is a small story,
exactly,
has an arc of its own, but then they all connect to a bigger arc?
Yep. And that's how I looked at this, especially as we've had some momentum and have Hollywood touch a couple things and seen what they're looking for, even though it always changes. But still, when I thought about Dark Landing and what it could be, I just envisioned it as me sitting at a conference table across from Hollywood executives talking about why they would want to buy this series, and the episodes pre-written in such a way that a screenwriter could take it and make it a 1-hour TV show. That was the whole approach, and do it in a way that's not. I'm rewatching all of Babylon 5 because I had the flu earlier, and they have certain episodes that are like 3 episodes long, and now those you kind of lose the momentum, especially when they came out and they were showing you had to wait a week, and then you had to wait another week, and then they end the season on a cliffhanger, and then you have to wait for the whole season. That kind of pisses me off. So we didn't want to do that. We like the Star Trek's original series episodes, where you have a complete new story, but you know what? Kirk, Spock, and McCoy are going to go save the universe someplace else next week, and it's going to be different, but it's going to be the same. And so that's what we're trying to deliver. That's what that was the original intent.
It sounds. Go ahead, Hank.
No, I was going to say, in each episode, you learn a little something new about the characters that over the course of the season, you have character growth and things like that from the little pieces you're picking up along the way.
Absolutely. Yep. What I was going to say is, this sounds harder than it is, but we all grew up watching those episodes and serials, and so if you relax a little bit, it's not that hard to do. But the really awesome thing for me personally as a writer with this series is it's taught me how to write endings, because I got to write 12 of them. A lot of times ending a book can be difficult. So getting a lot of practice making each episode standalone, but having a thread of, different character background things that kind of tie all the episodes together. And I'm pretty proud of that. And I really would like to get some good feedback on that, I hope.
And when you really stick that landing and the ending is great, it.
Well, I'm ridiculous when I finish one of these. I'm like giggling to myself, and I'm like, "This is so awesome!" and I'm like, I hope somebody else doesn't. 1, hope other people like it, and 2, I hope they don't see me right now in case they don't like it because I look like a goober. Yeah, good times.
Oh, that's so fun. So you're cranking these out every 18 days, and I think you guys said about 30,000 words. What does that look like for a daily writing process?
For me, in the first couple, I think episode 3 might be more like 26, but they're all going to be at least 30 now because the characters are more complex as the series goes. So they're all going to hit right at 30. But I work 42 and a half hours a week as my regular non-overtime week. So assuming I don't have any other call outs or anything, I have 3 days off because I work 4 10 and a halves basically. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday are my main writing days. I try to crank out 5,000 plus words on those days and maybe 500 to 2,000 on the other days. Sometimes it's pretty anemic depending on how early I can get up. I get up at 3 a.m. on my work days and I write until about 5:20 with a couple of short breaks. Then I go to work, get there by 6:30. And then on my days off, I get up about 5 or 5:30 and I write as much as I can until I start shuffling kids to school and I just keep plugging away at it. So for me, it's a little bit lopsided. I have 3 days of hard output and then 4 days of the best I can do with the focus of staying in the story so that I'm ready for the big writing days.
Staying in the story, what do you do on those days to keep it? Because on those heavy output days, you're just blazing through the story and you're probably progressing right along and the momentum is carrying. And then you put the brakes on for those 4 days. How do you keep that fresh and alive while you're riding in a patrol car or sitting in meetings or whatever your day entails?
Well, I always try to write a little bit new each day. On my days when I have more time, sometimes I'll read the story all the way from the beginning. But I will download it into a format I can listen to on my phone. And I'll listen to it on the way to work. I'll listen to it on the way home. If nothing's going on, I'll listen to it while I'm driving around and just kind of not forget the story. Because that's the hardest thing is when you're trying to make it as a writer and you still have a day job and a family and maybe a second day job or whatever. If you go a couple of days without being in that story, you're basically starting over. So I really emphasize on staying in touch with the project until you at least get the first draft done if you can.
And Scott, I know you're a big proponent of dictation, and how does that play into it on your down days? Do you rely on dictation to help you try to get some of those words?
It's a love-hate thing for me. Right now I'm using dictation. I use a hybrid method. I type and talk because especially writing fantasy or any speculative fiction, even the best dictation program has a hard time with. Like, for example, in this story, the main character's name is Thaddeus, or Thad, but my dictation programs want to say Dad. Every time I say Thad, it thinks I'm saying Dad, and I have to go back and correct it every single time. So I type some of it, I dictate some of it, and it helps take some of the strain off my wrist and elbow is the main reason I'm using dictation. But sometimes I dictate a lot. Sometimes I just don't feel I'm in the mood for dictation. Just depends.
Craig, what about you? Do you have any little tricks or maybe not tricks, but little tools that you picked up along the way that help you to do the massive amount of writing that you do?
I write every day, and to me, it's just simply more hours in the chair, getting better hours in the chair. I work 70 to 80 hours a week, so it's not extreme to knock out. My goal is 3,000 words a day is all. I've gotten as much as 11,000, but that's a burn. That burns me out. I've averaged my best book, Cygnus Expanding. I wrote 108,000 words in 17 days because that story flowed so well. And that's the thing with writing every day. Like Scott said, you got to stay in the story. I like starting a story and keep writing until I finish it. I avoid shiny new things because they are extremely destructive to the overall process of writing a story. You have to you start it, you go, and then you finish. And one of the tricks, this is my storytelling trick, is I write the first chapter and I write the last chapter, and then I go back and follow up the first chapter and write everything in between. So I know where I want to begin, I know where I want to end, and then I just flesh out the characters and the fun things that go in between the two.
How much of that middle do you know going into it?
Enough of it. I've got details. I've got scenes that I want to see unfold. I've got character traits that I want to see appear. I've got characters that I need to show. And one thing I do is I have yellow stickies all over my wall here. I have a whiteboard, and I'll make notes on, hey, this character needs to do something, and just keep a list of who needs to appear. The current book, Blockade, has 7 unique POVs that are intertwined consistently through the whole book. So I wasn't sure it was working, but once again, best beta readers in the world, I shot them the first 40,000 words, and I said, hey, could you take a look and make sure you can follow this? And they all came back and said had absolutely no problem following 7 different POVs through the story. So
and when you get that kind of feedback, you're emboldened to press ahead and burn through the rest of the story, I can imagine.
Yeah, and that's what I did to help was I added better location tags before each subsection within the chapter of which group are we addressing now. Alien Destroyer number 1, Alien Destroyer number 2, Alien Battleship number 1, number 2. So just to break those out to make it very even more clear.
When you're writing a book that's north of 100,000 words in 2.5 weeks, how long do you spend on the pre-writing that then allows you to get that kind of productivity out?
4 seconds. I
love that. That's my favorite answer I think I've heard yet.
I like Scott said, once you have an idea, jumping on it when you're ready. So I think about stories all the time, as do probably every single writer out there. And when it comes time to, the fingers are dangling over the keyboard, I start with a template, and I use a Create Space template that I've been using for 2 years now. And I type my book right into that template, so it looks exactly like the last 25 books. And that's comfort. So I start at a comfortable level. Here's my all my list of books and stuff, and here's says chapter 1, and it automatically sets up the chapters for me, and I start typing away. So all of the prep work of having that template in which I type the story is done. All I have to do is look at it. I update the title, so in the header of each page, I can see this is the title. Here's who it is, and this is what we're doing, and launch. The best thing you can do for a book, and I am fanatical about the first words being high impact. So I will think about that a long time. And when I write that first chapter, I will edit it probably 10 times. I will send it to my beta readers. I will send it to other people, and I'll go back, because the best thing you can do, Mickey Spillane said it, the first chapter sells this book, the last chapter sells the next book. I want that first chapter, when somebody looks on the look inside and Amazon, to say, hell yeah, I want this book. And that's, I like I said, I'm fanatical about making sure that first chapter is as perfect as I can get it, is as engaging, is the best language. And I try to flow that through the rest of the book. But I really spend a lot of time making sure that first chapter is right.
Scott, I know you're a big proponent of using Scrivener to organize your writing and to write in. Does it freak you out a little bit that Craig is just writing directly into a Create Space template?
I'm shivering inside. It's just I'm freezing. No, I just he sent me some final post edit drafts and everything, and I import those into my Scrivener. And the reason I do it is because I have all of the Dark Landing episodes in one file, and I can search the entire file. You'll find search, for a character or a setting. It's easy to fact check that way. And then I get the little tiny ego bump where I go, oh, look, we broke 100,000 words on this so far, because I can get the word count for the entire series, which is fun. Yeah. I work in anything. I work sometimes in Scrivener. I work in Google Docs. I work in Word. I just, I have words will travel. It's not a problem.
Absolutely. So the series is called Dark Landing. The first one drops December 18th, which is the day this episode is airing. So when you listen to this, you can go grab that first episode, and they're going to follow every 18 days or so. Guys, thanks so much for coming on and telling us about this. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to snatch it up just as soon as it's out. Thank y'all for coming on the show today.
Thanks, Hank. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and do y'all have
do
y'all have a website for Dark Landing, or is the Amazon page the best place to send folks to?
So Amazon, Dark Landing, one word. There's only one like it. Have a nice day, and that will hopefully be enticing. What you see will say, hey, we had the cover artwork done by Kevin McLaughlin, and he did a great job creating a template in which we put the artwork and the overall story for the art. So it'll look like a series. You know how some series don't look like a series? That's a kiss of death if you're trying to sell it as a series. Ours will very clearly look like a series.
Awesome. Well, we're going to send everybody to the Amazon page to go pick up Assignment Dark Landing, the first in the Dark Landing series. Thanks, guys, for coming on.
Have a good one, Hank.
Awesome. Thanks, Hank.
Thanks for listening to the Author Stories podcast. For more great author interviews like this one, go to hankgarner.com and dig through the archives. There's something there I know you'll love. Now stay tuned for a special audio clip from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series.
Jason yanked the coils of safety rope to one shoulder and heaved them out the attic window. The bundle bounced over the roofline and dropped to the yard below. He tightened the harness, making sure the shoulder straps were snug over his sweatshirt. He threaded his rope through the braking device, tested it, and clipped everything to the carabiner at his navel. So far, so good. Fireman Mike would be proud. His stomach flipped as he neared the octagonal window. Had he tied the correct knots? Would he get himself killed? Weeks had passed since Mike's tutorial but he had to attempt the break-in now, while both Van Brunts were at the Christmas Eve service. He swung his legs through the window and felt for the roof. His sneakers gripped the shingles and he wriggled out, grateful for once to have feet as big as snowshoes. He pulled on a ski mask and sang, "Spider-Man, Spider-Man, does whatever a spider can." He lowered his body. Wind punched him in the jaw like a supervillain, surprising him. His sweatshirt rode up and snow burrowed into his navel. He looked down but couldn't see his feet. He relaxed his hands and put a few ounces of weight on the rope. Clots of snow broke away, dove over the edge, and took far too long to hit ground. He drew his rope around the pipe and pulled tight. Now he could drop. No, you will not drop. You will rappel. You will rappel very safely. He backed towards the edge, towards the point of no return. The backyard lurched into view. It was a 4-story fall, and he'd probably hit the stairs on the way down. He sledded helplessly. His legs fell, swung, and kicked the side of the house. Alarm bells went off in his head. He gripped the rope. It looked like nothing. A shoelace. Jason Crane, you're a damn fool. He went limp and fell over. The rope gave a jolt, and the harness tried to castrate him. He twisted, trying to save his poor descendants. He began to spin. His arm bashed through a row of icicles. The spin slowed, reversed, and at last he came to a stop with his back to the house, dangling over the backyard. "Thank you, rope. That's a good rope. Well done." He tried to turn around, but couldn't. With patience, he worked out a method of kicking in circles and managed to press his sneakers to the side of the house. He needed slack. He gathered his loose rope to the small of his back and disengaged the brake. Zip! He fell fast, all his weight on the rope now. His feet, planted, shot up over his head. The brake caught him, and the rope vibrated as wildly as a guitar string striking a note of panic. Jason heard a crunching sound and looked up. The leaf gutter crumpled and poured a stream of bitter ice water into his eyes. He snarled and wiped his face, dripping humiliation. Jason rested a moment and stared at his reflection in the glass. He was an enormous Macy's balloon drifting over New Jersey, tethered at the navel like underdog. "How the hell did you get up here, kid?" He did an awkward split, one foot above the window and the other below, hanging